Hello, I'm Peter Bella, and I'm here with Mr. Paul Stevenson and Charles Funk from Sago Resources. Hello, Paul.
Hello there.
Very nice to talk to you. The first time having a chance to speak with you. And Sago Resources is also very new to me. To that, I can give a shout out to Charles. Thanks, Charles, for bringing this company to my attention.
No, my pleasure.
Great work on the company presentation materials and the website, you guys. Very impressive amount of information. It's, to me, a very compelling plan and basis of evidence from which to work here. Porphyry exploration in southern BC. I guess maybe if I could put it to you, Paul, to speak briefly about the company and maybe the question of old data and has the project been drilled to death or anything like that?
No, the original work, there is some old work in the area, but that was in the days of the Ingerbell, when this area that Sago now holds was made up of a numerous quantity of small claim holdings. And so Silver Standard did some work in one corner, and Granby, and later Bethlehem in another area. After the Dave Barrett government in British Columbia in 71 or 2, mining during that period shut down a lot. The claims came open, and two prospectors, Doug Hopper and Doug McLeod, staked the claims, staked the whole area. They each had their own block, and worked on it for many years, and then brought it to me, the two of them together, and we were able to tie up this big block in one agreement, and then begin a scientific search of the whole system. It's a huge system. It's over 2,500 meters by 2,000 meters of alteration, strong alteration. And we began work in 2008, a bit, steadily defining more and more and getting more information.
Wonderful. Thank you. One of the lines in the news release yesterday that jumped out at me was mention of years spent collecting the data that you've put together on the project.
That's right. We started off typically with geochem survey. We put off IP because Copper Mountain was using the Titan 24 IP, Quantec Titan 24 IP, so we wanted to see if it worked before we did IP. They seemed happy with it, so we did the same. A lot of our trenching actually were old bulldozer trenches that were dug in the 60s and never reclaimed. A lot of them didn't hit rock. So, and the surface rights are held by a rancher. And so we promised her we would redig those trenches and map them, get them down to rock, and then do reclamation. And for that work, we received Best Reclamation in British Columbia in mining exploration in 2007, I believe it was. Oh, no, it couldn't have been. It was later than that. I've forgotten what year. But most of our trenches were really digging old trenches that never got to rock and then reclaiming them properly.
Wonderful, wonderful. Good work. Glad to hear it. All around high quality exploration work here with Sago and Miner Mountain. And this really is a flagship. There's nothing else in the company of...
No, it's a huge target, and it'll take money to develop it, and we really didn't want to get property rich or property poor, I mean. So there's enough there for one company to work on. Yeah.
And 2019 was a productive year. Well done. Mm-hmm. And the year's not over yet. Charles, what next?
Yep.
Yeah, I think for your listeners and for people new to the story, I think I can maybe sort of introduce them as it was introduced to me. I'm an advisor to Sago, and the reason I'm an advisor to Sago is twice over the last 10 years I've tried to buy this project. And I was joking with someone yesterday that if you can't beat them, join them. So So we agreed to some options, and I've joined as a technical advisor. The thing that always stood out to me on this property is that there's a big area of alteration that goes under till cover, and there's some pretty spectacular grades in drilling and trenching, albeit small. But the story hasn't been well told. You know, the guys at Sago had done a lot of work over the last few years that have put the data together that have allowed us to get to this point, which we'll talk about over the rest of this call. But I think if all that background work hadn't been done, we couldn't have got to the point where we're talking today about this opportunity ahead for Sago.
Certainly. And I appreciate in the presentation deck, slide 15, that has the areas, the target areas marked out, and some planned RC hole collar locations, and the locations of old drill collars as well. Just stepping back and looking at all that information kind of from a high level, really helpful for me to understand what's been done before, and what you're looking at doing, right? Really powerful stuff there for me that helped a lot.
If you pull back a bit further, Miner Mountain is just north of Princeton, just 15 kilometres north of the Copper Mountain mine, and I think everyone's familiar with the Golden Triangle. That's the sexy area in British Columbia. But if you look closely, and on slide 4 of Sago's presentation, most of the copper produced in this province actually comes from south central BC. I think if some of those mines were a little newer, I think people might have an appreciation of some of the higher grades that were in Highland Valley, in New Afton. Jay Paul just referred to the Ingabel at Copper Mountain, which had high grades. So I think historically there's been a misrepresentation of the grade of some of the porphyry systems in southern BC, because if they were found as new discoveries today, I think nearly all of them would be considered tier 1 copper discoveries. And the benefit of that to Sago is that only being 15 kilometres away from a very hungry mill, you know, Copper Mountain getting later in its mine life, even a smaller resource at Miner Mountain would probably be of significant interest to Mitsubishi and Copper Mountain, the owners of the Copper Mountain mine. So I think our hurdle for success is lower than some other projects, particularly some of the infrastructure poor projects in BC. And in terms of exploration, most of the substantive, the project was first recognised for its copper potential over 100 years ago. In fact, they were mining for coal in the basin just north of Princeton, and they tunnelled directly from coal into copper, which is pretty unusual. And that prompted a search for copper exploration. Some of the more significant work was done by a company Jay Paul referred to called Granby, who showed that there was some copper porphyry mineralisation. And then really that fragmentation of ownership that Jay Paul talked about meant that it never saw any sort of systematic exploration until Sago picked it up in the mid-2000s. And Sago has shown some fantastic holes, 100 metres of 0.95% copper and 0.55 grams per tonne gold. But when I first looked at this, you could see that was in structural zones in the country rock, and they hadn't identified in the drill core the porphyry that drives that alteration and drives that mineralisation. And so when we sat down over the last few months and compiled all this data, we've got a couple of really compelling targets. One, the Empress Zone, immediately to the northwest of this area, that's got a pretty classic alkalic soil footprint. Really high gold and really high copper and gold in soils, with all the supporting elements that you like to see, the molybdenum, the zinc. In this case, it's also got never been drilled. So we're really looking forward to drilling that. And when you combine that with a new target to the north called the Sovereign Zone, and a long-lived target, a gold-rich target to the south, that has some, has got trenches like 10 metres at 1.2% copper, another trench of 32 metres at 0.3 copper and a gram gold. But there has been a couple of holes, but not into the core of that anomaly. So we thought the best way to explore this system in this big alteration zone under till cover is what you said, is is an RC program that systematically tests all these productive areas that we would like to commence subject to a raise early next year, and see if we can really get on to the centres that are going to be driving this mineralisation.
Thank you, Charles. Paul, can I ask you, some of these new targets for you, having been looking at this project for years now, is some of this really new thinking, or how much is it kind of stuff that you had in mind for some time now?
Most of these, particular Empress and the gold copper target, we were getting, put it this way, we were getting there. We did do a trench right at the end of the drill season last year, and which is in the southwest corner of the Empress zone, and got some 1% copper, some very good gold results. But when you're working on it day to day, that's one of the reasons it's nice to stop and start to do a data review. You tend to be drilling where you're getting, we were trying to find where the structure was going. We went easterly, we should have gone west, we now realize. But you're building data, and then that takes somebody fresh to come in with fresh eyes, like Charles has looked at it and said, well, wait a minute, you're coming right into this thing. Here are the targets. And so they're not surprising in the least, but they're it took a little kick to get the focus over there.
Well, again, and such a large land package.
Lots
of different
exactly.
places to go.
And it's so altered. It's hard to break a rock on that property without finding very strong alteration. So it's a big system on a big property, and we've now, with Charles' help, come into some very, very strong targets.
And Charles, again, maybe to ask about this slide 15 again, and this spacing on some of these holes, right? Talk about a large system, large spacing between these holes too.
Yeah, I think if you look at I dubbed it the Porphyry Superhighway. There's a major fault that runs up through the Nicola from the border all the way into central BC, and almost consistently at every sort of 10 to 30 kilometres, there's a porphyry centre. There's Copper Mountain, and then there's Minor Mountain, and then there's Axe and Dill Prime, Aspen Grove, and then Big Kid, just to name the few that go directly north. And the interesting feature on all these systems is they have a big zone of propylitic alteration, the sort of wider, the most outboard porphyry alteration. And all of those systems have multiple porphyry intrusions within them. They can be different grades, they can have different copper and gold ratios, but all of them, including the mines, Copper Mountain, Highland Valley, New Afton, have multiple intrusions. So we wanted to design a program where we can systematically test under that till cover, test these best geochemical and geophysical targets, and we will use our understanding of the geology, our interpretation of the alteration, to hopefully identify multiple centres in this corridor. And the nice thing about an RC program is if we hit interesting rocks, we can react instantly and push that hole down. So it's both a systematic step-out program, but it's also a discovery drilling program at the same time.
And it's a large program, 40 to 60 shallow RC holes mentioned. Wow.
Yeah, we're fortunate that the till cover is really shallow, like it's between 5 and 20 metres across the property. So we can drill a lot of holes and cover a big area and just push down the holes that the alteration and mineralisation justify. And
then follow up with the core program to get the structure and start putting together a deeper understanding. Wonderful.
Exactly.
Paul, I asked about this proposed program, and have you been involved in anything quite similar to this with some of your adventures at other porphyries in BC? Yes,
I was the CEO of a company called Booker Gold, which became Pacific Booker Minerals. In fact, the board of SAGO had been with that company right through to preliminary economic assessment, at which point we left and we formed SAGO and came to work on this property. So
Peter,
I started in porphyry.
Morrison porphyry.
Yeah, that's the Morrison porphyry up by Bavine Lake. And I've worked in porphyry copper exploration. Well, I started in 1965. So over the years, porphyry coppers are my interest. Alkalic copper gold porphyries are quite different than what we used to be looking for in the old days, or even 10, 15 years ago. And so that's why you need people with expertise in this type of porphyry environment.
Thank you. Again, in the presentation materials, I appreciate some of the technical diagrams explaining some of the basic types of alteration that you see with these alkalic porphyry systems, and mapping that onto what you're seeing at surface as well, and the various levels of the different geochemistry. It seems like you've blanketed the project really in geochem so far.
Yes, the geochem has the magnetics as well. The IP has only covered half the property because it was very expensive. And in the past, we did some thin section work on the rock. And in the last 2 years, we've done quite a bit more. And we've been staining to follow the potassium feldspars a lot more in the last 2 years.
I think to Paul's credit and Sago's credit, they've put 70% of all the money Sago's ever raised into this project, and if they hadn't taken that and collected that step out data, I don't think these opportunities would be as clear. Now, everyone who drills and finds high grade, be it copper, gold, silver, whatever your metal, you always end up getting a little myopic because you've hit something economic and you're looking for more volume of it. But if they hadn't have collected that kind of data, I don't think this opportunity would be sitting here today as we see it and discuss it.
Certainly not. It wouldn't look the way it does at this point with all the different layers of information. And to that, I've tapped a few people on the shoulder within the last 24 hours saying, hey, this is new to me. Is it new to you too? What's going on? And that was kind of the reaction from most people. Some people had a passing familiarity with the name and the project, but no current sense of the technical interpretation and plan here. So thank you. And I'd maybe ask Paul there, just anything else to say about 2020, the plans beyond potentially the immediate financing here.
Oh yes, I think when Charles started, he mentioned he tried to buy the property twice. We've had offers from major mining companies and mid-tier and a couple of juniors. The company does not want to do the standard option agreement, so that we want to keep this as one project, one company, and our interest is more in equity investment in the company to develop it. We have no intention of optioning it to a major and retaining a very tiny percentage.
And this is ground that you staked again, is that correct?
No, this ground was originally staked by Doug Hopper and McLeod, and we optioned it from them.
Okay, and you've completed that earn-in?
Oh yes, we've completed our earn-in quite a long time ago.
And any royalties I didn't see mention, or I don't recall?
There's a 3% royalty, 1.5% of which is purchasable for, I think it's $1 million.
BC Minerals Exploration, what a business, right? Great to have a chance to talk to you here, Mr. Stevenson.
Well, thank you. It's a great place to explore. I should add that the community of Princeton is totally supportive of mining. And the First Nations were miners prior to contact. They mined ochre. And they've been involved in mineral exploration and mining since the first prospectors came to the Princeton area. So it's BC is a great place to work, and Princeton in particular is an absolutely wonderful place to work.
Thank you again. Charles, thank you as well for bringing this company to my attention. Is there anything else you'd like to mention?
No, thank you very much, Peter. I think it's a fabulous opportunity. So we're looking forward to raising the money and testing these targets. I think they're some of the more compelling copper targets in BC.
Wonderful. This has been J. Paul Stevenson and Charles Funk, Sego Resources, SGZ on the TSX Venture. Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Thank
Bye,
you, Peter.